Thank you for coming. Today we heard House Bill 2153 in committee. It was a very fantastic hearing. The death penalty in Missouri has been around since the state was founded, and it's time now that we, as a civilized state and a civilized society, look to remove that. I was asked, why do I feel that way? And I said, well, in this day and age when society is so bent on vengeance, and we see murder rates going up in our cities, and it's just vengeful killings, the state should not be one that we should be an example that would not allow that to happen. There are many, many reasons. It costs more to execute than it does to incarcerate. The victims are victimized over and over again with appeals, which is just a horrifying event for them. And the state, frankly, makes mistakes. And if a mistake is made when it comes to the death penalty, there's no correcting it. There are 5 people on death row in this country every year that are exonerated. Then you have to ask yourself, well, if 5 were exonerated, how many were innocent that did not get exonerated and were executed? We had a very good discussion in committee. I'm looking forward to voting it out of committee. I appreciate all those that came to testify in favor, and it was remarkable that nobody came to testify against the bill. I know that everybody has a hard time looking at whether or not vengeance is the proper vehicle for the death penalty. You know, the questions always be, if your daughter was murdered, how would you feel? And I would say I'd probably want vengeance at that moment, but time would go on, and I would hope that I would come to my senses and understand that Missouri is a pro-life state, and pro-life has to have more than just babies involved. Every life is precious, and redemption is up to the Lord, and I look forward to it going on. I would like to represent. I would like to.
You do represent me.
Yeah, well, introduce the Archbishop.
Jim, thank you. Good afternoon. And it has been a real privilege for me to be able to be here at the State House in Jefferson City to testify on behalf of Bill 2153 to repeal the death penalty here in the state of Missouri. Of course, as a believer in Christ, as a believer in faith, I know that each human life has its dignity that's given to it by God. I know that there are many emotions that are involved in speaking about the death penalty. I, too, feel for the families who have to withstand the impact of losing a loved one to violence and realize the emotions that they have in experiencing such a horrible, horrible thing. But as a state, we cannot take the life of another because each one is given the dignity that God has given to us, and each one is given the capacity to come to repentance and to ask forgiveness from God. We want that opportunity to take place. So for these reasons, I speak today on behalf of House Bill 2153 to repeal the death penalty here in the state of Missouri. Thank you. I, too, would like to introduce Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman. Senator Coleman, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Archbishop. You know, one of the things that we're asked to do when we're setting state policy is not to rely on emotion, to not rely on our faith, but to rely on what's just and what is going to be in the best interest of all Missourians. Unfortunately, the death penalty in Missouri has not deterred crime. It has not been cheaper. It has not even been foolproof. And so at some point, we're called to recognize that it's not working. And if we are a pro-life state, and I believe that we are, we need to be protecting even those who deserve it the least. I think that the idea that we would like to have vengeance, the idea that we'd like to have justice, that we'd like to have a punishment that's just beyond imagining, kind of an Old Testament level of punishment, we know that it's not working right now. And even in the Old Testament, God taught that the person who accused of the crime was the person who was supposed to throw the first stone. And right now we have something that is kind of sanitized. It's put out of mind. And I think people don't think about what is the horror of the state actually using its power to take the life of a citizen. Representative Steve Butts, I think, would like to have a few words as well.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Representative Murphy, congratulations on getting this bill heard today. That, as we know from Missouri legislature point of view, is a big step forward. And Archbishop, thank you for your leadership on this issue. The death penalty, repealing it, is personal to my family. I know many people know I have a sister who was murdered in Seattle 15 years ago, and a heinous, heinous crime. When the perpetrator was arrested, and the prosecutors in King County asked my mom and dad, who myself and my sister had to accompany them, would you like us as the family to seek the death penalty? It was difficult. I'm sure my dad, he was a tough Marine, had to reach back with everything, but he said, my faith says all life is sacred, even this murderer's life. And eventually this man is in prison, life with no chance of parole. But when it's that personal to you, it's not just policy, but I agree with everything else from the policy side. It does not deter murders. The state should not be taking vengeance in this way. Society can protect itself with our modern incarceration system for these perpetrators. And for these reasons, I hope this moves forward, and I really, really look forward to this getting on the House and Senate floors. Thank you. I'll introduce a former colleague, Tony Vescovo.
Hi, I'm former State Representative Tony Lovasco, here as a private citizen just to support this bill. I carried this legislation in the House when I was here a few years back. It's something that's very important to me. One of the things that I think that we really miss when we discuss criminal justice is the impact it has on folks that are not part of the system. And the death penalty is, bar none, one of the biggest things that does that. Whether it be family members that are being hauled in to testify over and over again at every appeals process, every hearing that happens, whether it's all the people that have to deal with the incarcerated individual and the emotions that they go through. There's a lot of aspects of this process that we really just ignore. And I think it's great that we finally have something moving forward that actually lets the people of Missouri recognize that we are going to reassess this and we are going to finally put an end to something that, quite frankly, should never have been done to begin with. Because the reality is, if the government can take the lives of the least of us, it can take the lives of any of us. And it's important that we respect that life.
I think at this time, if you have any questions?
Yeah.
Does Missouri law enforcement largely support your bill?
There was no testimony in committee today in opposition to the bill, so I would say if they had a problem, they would have been there. I think the general public over time has softened on the issue. I think that the general public now realizes that there's been so many mistakes, so many errors, that it's time to take a look. And a lot of people just don't want to speak out on it anymore because in their heart they're saying vengeance is real. I want anybody that does these crimes to be punished to the max, and then common sense takes place and says, it's not the place of government to do that. My colleague Representative Lovasco once gave me an example that has stuck with me from the day he told me. And that was if you came home and found somebody in your home killing a loved one, and you pulled out a gun and you shot them, you would think that that's justified. But if they got away, and a week or two later you found them walking down the street, and you saw them and you pulled your gun and you shot them, would that be justified? Of course not. That's murder. They're no longer a threat. You've just murdered them. Why should the state do the same thing? When the perpetrator's in custody, they're no longer a threat. And to put them, to kill them is just unthinkable.
So there's no opposition from the public today, but some of the representatives, some of your colleagues sitting on the committee did express some skepticism for the bill. How do you plan to talk to your colleagues who might not want to vote for this, and what are you planning on doing to convince them?
Well, we're going to continue to talk. We're going to continue to, when you go through all of the different things, whether or not be what happens with the victims and how they're drug in over and over and over. What came out in the hearing today was, what about all the prison officials that have taken care of these prisoners for 15 years or more and then gone through the process of seeing them executed? What is the PTS, they are put through a lot, and they need counseling too. We put all these people through all of this to accomplish something that really doesn't do anything other than kill somebody. Right now we need to look at what is just. Putting them in jail for the rest of their lives without the possibility of parole is not letting them off easy. But it is better for the state, and it's more just, and it's certainly ethically, in my view, a better thing to do.
The bill also doesn't include people who have already been sentenced to death. Can I ask why that exception has been made?
Well, I didn't want to impose on other victims' families that may wish for that to go through, but it does nothing. I believe if this bill passes, the governor has that option to do that. So I think on a case-by-case basis, you would probably see a lot of them overturned.
And then just one clarifying question. I think it was mentioned in committee, but I just wanted to verify. Has this bill ever gotten a committee hearing before?
In 2016, Senator Paul Wieland was able to have a discussion on the floor as an amendment. That amendment was ultimately withdrawn before it was voted on. But there was also, my understanding, a companion bill that was heard in the House in 2016. Interestingly, the four of us electeds who are standing and former elected who are standing here all came in together in the same class in the 100th General Assembly, and it's the first time that there has been a hearing in our 8 years here.
So according to the Death Penalty Center, it looks like Missouri, North Dakota, and Iowa all have the Republican trifecta, and Alaska is split. The rest of the states who do not use the death penalty out of whatever, like 23 or whatever, they're all Democratic. So do you think this Missouri trifecta has an appetite for repealing?
Yeah, I just will say, I think a lot of times what we do when we're setting public policy is not partisan. As you see, we're a bipartisan group up on talking before you today, and a nonpartisan person as well. Whether or not this bill is going to end up on the governor's desk this year, I think it's an incredibly important step forward to make sure that people understand what are the true costs associated with continuing the death penalty and continuing to move this policy forward. So I don't know that it's really a partisan issue as much as it is, have we reached the point in which we have a recognition that this is what the right thing to do is as a state.
Representative, do you have anything to add?
Just to tag off of the cost part you were talking about, what stats do we have on that?
The cost?
The real, yeah.
I don't have my notes in front of me, and so I don't want to misspeak about what the actual costs are, but I know that the Missouri Death Penalty Project has that, and Jim maybe has it memorized.
Nationally, it's estimated that for each death it costs the state $4 million. And that's not just an incarceration. That's not the big part of it. It's really the amount of lawfare that has to take place over the course of all of the appeals and so forth. They were saying today the state has, their prosecutors, we have over $4 million budget a year just for that. So, and that's just for death penalty cases. So it's very, very costly, and it's much cheaper just to incarcerate than it is to put them to death.
Do you know how much it is to keep them in prison versus death penalty?
We have
No,
the
I-
per annum data. We could get,
We
you
can
could,
get
if you
you
want to
that.
follow up with my office, we can get you the per annum data per inmate.
So you bring up the costs associated with putting someone to death versus incarcerating them. Wouldn't another way to fix, obviously you're taking a moral stance against the death penalty, but if you simplify, prevent all of the appeals processes, wouldn't that cut down on the costs? Because it seems like you're placing more of a burden on people by incarcerating them for life. They're continuing to be a burden on society.
Well, I would say that the only reason the cost was brought up is that's one of the arguments you have for the death penalty, that it's cheaper to put them to death than to keep them. And that was just to counter that. You know, my moral argument is much more important to me. It's not a matter of cost.
Thank you.
Last question. I'd like to ask one with all the questions we could ask about whether this will get to the governor's desk, et cetera. The next step is, do you know that it's going to get a vote in that committee?
The chairman has guaranteed me it will get a vote in the committee. Where it goes from there, we'll see.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Great.